Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for watching Sustainable Japan Project's YouTube channel. We have launched our channel back in January 2022 in order to achieve our mission of creating more sustainable society at the global level by inviting people from all fields and sectors around the world to discuss new ways of collaboration and development of sustainable cross-border business for our planet Earth 100 years from now. My name is Wakako from ASTERI Corporation, which is one of the founding members of Sustainable Japan Project, and I'll be the MC for today's session. So for the month of April, we have Jacquiline Pimer from African Trade Policy Center, part of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Jackie currently works as a trade expert, supporting the development of AFC-FTA strategies. Hello, Jackie, and thank you so much for joining us today. It is a pleasure having you as our guest for the month of April.
Thank you, Wakako. I've been looking forward to being a part of this conversation, and it's really an honor to be a part of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much again. So let's get started. We would like to know a lot about you to start off our session, and your background, your story, and how you led yourself to where you are now.
Well, I am Ugandan. I'll start from there. I'm Ugandan and studied law school. I went to law school and then did a master's in trade and economics, international trade and economics. I've always known that I was going to do trade. I had a family member who always inspired me because he worked with the WTO a lot. And I was just inspired about, you know, the economic part of our lives, you know, because I recognize that economic activities and livelihoods actually change lives, make our lives better, empower us, even especially as women. So the motivation was all round, really, just to be independent, but also the fact that I could contribute to the policies and laws or environment that makes trade and, you know, economic development better for our people. So that's really the motivation for why I'm a trade expert, a trade lawyer. Yes, so my first job was with the New Partnership for Africa's Development, which was at the time a part of a secretariat, a part of our National Planning Authority. And we worked on what we call the African Peer Review Mechanism. And that's where I really learned about the connectivity, you know, about governance and our social economic, how it's connected to trade, how it's connected to our economic empowerment. I was what we call the mile 10. We were the cohort of mile of 2009 to 2010. We had a very enriching, you know, facilitators and lecturers. Somehow I got called into consultancy work. So I've been a consultant, an individual consultant for over 11 years, I think, on different issues of trade. The foundation for my specialization in trade came from the WTI, right, the World Trade Institute, which Wakako and I attended at different times. It's a very specialized course on trade governance, international trade governance, and it benefits from being within Switzerland, which holds the World Trade Organization, UNCTAD, all these organizations that we had site visits from and also benefited from internships with. So I got the main training from that, and I also got an opportunity to work with the WTI itself, and then later with the WTO. And then I started, that's when my journey with consultancy started. And I always say this, that it actually chose me because I didn't expect to be a consultant at a very young age. So I worked with the UNDESA and then kept getting referrals, and somehow found my specialization in trading services and on standards issues, because I've doing a lot of work on standards. And being back on the continent, I did a lot of work with the East African community, COMESA, regional integration in general, and all over the continent with different countries. So yes, that's a little bit of my background.
Great. Thank you so much, Jackie. Wow, you've been to many places, and now you're back in Uganda?
I'm still in Uganda, yes.
Because you always sound like you're traveling a lot, like back and forth. So I'm just wondering, this trade expert position requires you to move to different countries, different parts of Africa in order to discuss with, other members of the FTA?
Yes, the current position does, but also my other position, I'm a founder and partner with Trade Africa Consulting, which is a trade specialized firm, right? Consulting firm, under which I was doing a lot of the consultancies, but on the continent. So we've partnered with different experts in trade, some based in Accra, in South Africa, and so we work together. But also my work before the ATCP work required me to travel to the different partner states or member states that I was working in. For the ATCP, yes, it is a process, because my key role is to support the countries that are developing national strategies for the African Continental Free Trade Area, for implementation of their free trade area. So we have to do a lot of consultations. I mean, we support on the technical level as well. And so that means that we have to go to the countries and find out the needs and speak to different stakeholders. And it's sort of like a diagnostic, if you want, where we also interact with both government and private sector and just find ways to provide capacity, really, capacity building on AFCFTA issues, as we also support in the development of their strategies.
Wow, very interesting and challenging work that you're doing on day-to-day basis, right?
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I enjoy it very much. It also exposes me to the realities that we have as a continent, as individual countries, because very often we're grouped together as, Africa as a continent, but different parts of it have slightly unique backgrounds and issues and challenges, that we address. Yeah.
Wow, very intriguing to me. And amazing is that if you could share in a minute, what's amazing to me is that back in 2018, and I'd like to know more about the background and what drove those 54 countries out of 55 African Union nations to come together and work together to, to form this free trade area, which is very, to me, who've never been to Africa myself. I'd love to, now that I know you even better. And,
you're welcome to visit.
Many challenges, right? As you said, there are 54 countries, and each has its own history, own background, own culture, and so different from each other, correct? So what drove those countries to come together to create this FTA?
Actually, Wakako, it's not a process that started in 2018. I would take it way back to 1963, when we had what we call the Organization for African Unity, which transformed to the African Union. So in 1963, the Organization for African Unity was founded by the then president of the time. The Ugandan president, Milton Obote, was one of them. They had most of the countries, there were 32 founders. Most of the countries were coming out of colonization, and their primary goal was to decolonize, as well as, I think at the time, there was also appetite in South Africa to decolonize and also to fight appetite. And I think in 1999, that was when the transition from Organization for African Unity started, because then the member states, the heads of states, decided that they needed to now move from decolonization as their main agenda to growth and development, right? And then they formed the African Union, which I would say started operating in, I think maybe 2002, I think. Yes. So we had the Organization for African Union, the African Union in 2002. And so this one, of course, has member states of 55 countries, right? All the African countries. Yes, so in 2012, they had a summit in Addis Ababa where the heads of states decided that they agreed to form a continental free trade area. So that started in 2012, and then the agreement was crafted, which then was signed in 2018 in Kigali, which is what most people think is actually the beginning of the AfCFTA. But that's when the agreement was signed. And now the agreement being signed by 54 partner states wasn't really the start of it. It's signatories needed to then ratify the agreement. That means they have to go back and sort of accept it and domesticate it, and then deposit their instruments of ratification. That deposited, I think this past week was Djibouti, so we are at 43 member states that deposited their ratification. And that's also actually one of the processes, because country that as with my work in ATTP, what we find to do, we want to support them because some countries don't have the background information to participate within the negotiations, right? So that's that. You would mention earlier that the trading was supposed to start in 2021. Our secretariat was formulated in 2020, right at the start of the pandemic, right? So of course, the COVID-19 pandemic threw us, of course, a little bit, but we kept pushing on. So the agreement to start trading under it in 2021 has not yet been effective because the negotiations in both rules of origin and tariff schedules have not, they're not complete, right? So last month, this is in February, the partner states agreed to start trading under the agreed rules. That means that in July, we will actually start trading under the already agreed rules of origin. I think they've agreed to 87% of the rules of origin. So that's, that's the brief of it, the background of it. There are two phases of negotiations. So the first phase was establishing a dispute settlement, then the negotiations in trading goods and merchandise products, that is under the rules of origin and also tariff schedules. And then the third is trading services. Then the second phase, of course, will have a lot more other issues, which actually has already started. The negotiations in phase 2 have already started on competition issues, investment issues, e-commerce, because that's, especially with COVID, that became apparent. It was a critical issue. to deal with. And then the member states also agreed to include women and trade, women and youth in trade. So there's going to be a protocol being developed to ensure that women are key participants, and also the youth, because Africa is the youngest continent, has a very large number of young people. So we need to integrate them on purpose in the trade agenda. I think I also haven't mentioned the intellectual property rights. So those are the 5 areas for phase 2, which will be they develop protocols on those issues, and then we'll make part of the agreement for AFCFTA. Yeah.
Wow, there's a lot to do on your plate, Jackie.
Well, at least I'm not alone. There are a lot of experts working on different issues. So they do their part, I do my part. Yeah, it is. Wow. It's an interesting time to live in. Yes.
Very much so, very much so, sounds like. And so your advice around the legal aspects of this, each country's infrastructure?
Yes, it's not really legal. Well, unless you're saying, if you're relating the strategies to policies, yes, it's all round really. So you diagnose and say, let me start from the fact that the ATCP, before I joined, they developed a guide to help member states to develop strategies. But so it's not just one thing. One of the biggest things that is actually coming out is that Africa didn't wait. Let me start from the fact that the main objective for the Continental Free Trade Area is to increase intra-African trade. Africa didn't trade with each other for a long time because during colonialism, the colonizing states created a relationship with the states that they colonized, right? Where they produced raw materials to service their industries, right? And so that relationship grew and it was sustained even with free trade agreements or concessions. What do they call this? Under the WTO. I've forgotten. But that relationship, because it was already established, it was easier for African countries to trade with Europe because that was already an existing relationship. So we realized, unlike Asia, unlike the North America and Europe itself, Africa's trade, inter-Africa trade was very minimal. And so some of the issues was because we were not integrated, but also we had similar products or the infrastructure itself was difficult to achieve. So the regional integration, regional economic communities that exist, like the East African Community, COMESA, increased trade within those regions. But then East African trading with West Africa was still very difficult and more expensive. So one of the issues that is now coming up, the opportunities that I'm seeing that are happening, is an infrastructural interconnectivity. So they're we call them transport corridors that are being developed to just connect the whole continent with each other. And this will be in road infrastructure, railways, and also airlines, because a lot of agricultural produce are transported by air. But that's it's actually cheaper to transport to China, to Europe, than to take goods to the next African country and maybe in the other part of the continent. It's very difficult and expensive. So those are the issues that African countries are working on, and it's a mix of both at the continental level and also locally at the national level. So when we are advising, we have to look at all of this. We have to look at the issues of transport. We have to look at women. How is your strategy encouraging women businesses. And then the other issue also is SMEs, small and medium enterprises. How are those enterprises being developed that they are sustainable? We have the highest turnover of SMEs. You know, we have especially in Uganda, we have businesses being established and also with a very short lifespan. So in sustainable SMEs, how do they get access to finance? Those are issues that are dealt with at the national level, but they are strategies to enforce or implement the continental FTA, right? And the other key thing also is developing value chains across the countries. One of the issues which we both lived and studied in Switzerland is the issue of chocolate, right? We know that the biggest producers of cocoa are in Africa, right? Cote d'Ivoire and whatever, even coffee, because we export a lot of coffee from Africa, but we export them in raw form and therefore get a very small value for it. When it's exported, it's increased in value and manufactured. We buy back chocolate, which is almost 100 times more expensive, right? And that value is what we've missed. So value chains or value addition and value chains across the continent will help us industrialize, but also retain the value of the products that we are exporting. So why not get cocoa from Ghana, or and manufacture chocolates and drinking chocolates somewhere in Mauritius, for example, where the capacity is. So those are the things we are trying to do with the strategies, value addition, also market mapping, because we are under the impression that we produce, this is, I say an impression because you say we produce the same products, but if I have traveled, and this is really my personal opinion, I've traveled over different parts of the continent. What we produce in South Africa is different from what, and I'm talking really agricultural, is different from what is produced in West Africa. East Africa, we have these battles with prices of milk because we are overproducing milk, and yet we could actually export to West Africa that doesn't have a very high production of milk and meat and other issues. So yes, we might have some similarities, but there is a local demand, continental demand that can be serviced instead of, so there's that part as well, just to try and source local continental alternative markets and find a way to make it cheaper for us to trade amongst each other. Oh, I've said a lot, but I hope
thank you so much. It's really helpful for us to understand watching this channel. And is there any foreign investment coming in to support this FTA?
I mean, we have partners. I mean, the ECA is a partner of the ASTERI as one. So there are different development partners who are willing to work with the AFCFTA Secretariat in particular, but also the African Union Commission, because the AFCFTA is a baby, so to speak, of the African Union. So yes, there are many partners that would want to work with the different bodies of the continental free trade area, but also at the local, or not local, at the national level, many development partners are coming in. Because I work with the UN ECA, I know of the UN bodies, UNDP, And they do this in different ways. They support infrastructure development. I know for East African community, Trademark East Africa has been very instrumental in trade facilitation, because they support in developing infrastructure for like one-stop border post that makes trade very easy, single window, and what is it called? There's corridors, the transport corridors, and it has been so instrumental for trade costs within the East African community, and I hope that can be translated to other parts of the continent. The GIZ, the startup, the German government, US aid in some countries as well. So yes, there is external partners, but for private investment, I don't know yet how to respond to that part, because I'm not sure if I have seen private foreign investors supporting the AFCFTA. But I do know, for example, the African investors like the Dangote, they have had a lot of voice in to drive this process, because there's a benefit, right, for them also in increasing their market locally, and also sourcing, raw materials locally for their industries. So there are opportunities. I think one of the things that we want to see happening more is that investment is sustainable investment is done by Africans, because the businesses need to grow and also service the local communities. And most of the time, that's how, if the local investment is encouraged, it's going to be more, it's going to be far-reaching for the local communities that really need it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you, Jackie, so much. And so before we conclude our session, I'd like to know your view on how and whether there are possible means for our collaboration in the near future, in terms of like your description and explanation as to infrastructure and systemic, capacity building and transportation, finance, and all those areas, right, that you guys are working on. And is there anything that can do to support that initiative and the movement?
There's a plethora of areas, to be honest. And if you speak about Sustainable Japan projects on its own, one of the things that as a continent is becoming a reality is how climate change has affected us. And yet we still have to industrialize, right? And part of industrialization actually, and this is my own opinion, part of industrialization will require us to actually still affect the community, so to speak, the environment, so to speak. So one of the things that we're grappling with is how to sustainably encourage industrialization. So I think that's the how do we, there's the talk of new and more energy efficient technologies, but they're not very cheap, right? They're not cost friendly, especially for the communities that need it. That's one. The other part is that our productivity in agriculture has really been based on, or whether it has been affected by the changes in the climate patterns, right? And so we see a lot of issues when it comes to food security that needs to be dealt with. How do we start to maybe predict the weather better or how do we support communities to, for example, use irrigation or harvest rain when it's in excess. And these are really high capital intensive things that the farmers are not able to do for themselves for the most part. So yes, there are ways to do it. I think the public-private partnership for such infrastructure, that it needs to be targeted to the highest benefits to benefit for those things that benefit the community highest or most, right? So that's infrastructure, that's planning. Yeah, I think there are many areas. Yes, thanks.
Right. So sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but so it sounds like more of technology transfer that's needed and targeted to, you know, strategically developed area or area. So that's one of the ways that we can collaborate maybe in the future, because we have many members in our Sustainable Japan project, and we have all sorts of, you know, expertise that where we can share and collaborate in the coming months, I hope, and years.
Yeah. Well, Wakako transfer is good, I think, and I heard it. I'm not saying it's not okay, but I one of the things that I realized that sometimes technology that is developed for Japan might not properly work or align in the conditions in Africa. So the other part, which I think I could point out right now, is actually innovations, research and development, and innovations that are tailored to the context, you know. So transfer technology, it's really, I'm not saying no to it. I'm honestly not saying no to it. It's just that sometimes, a lot of times, the challenge with it being sustainable or it actually being cost effective for the context that we are transferring it to, it has its challenges. So I guess there should be a balance, because the innovative ways that we could develop this technology that actually addresses the key issues that are being faced by the communities might be a better way to achieve, to collaborate on that aspect. Yes.
So if I may recap or summarize what you just described. So instead of technology transfer, that's like simply transferring the technology that's being developed and used in Japan to Africa. Rather than that, it could be more of the fit if we focus on social innovation type of technology development together with Africa, not in general, but what each country or region needs.
Yes, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I think that you have a lot of skill already, so you can give us a baseline, so to speak. I'm not speaking technology terms, but baseline for us to start, but then contextualize whatever it is that we are solving to the context of that community. Yes.
Right. So based on what's already been accumulated. Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Jackie, so much. Is there any last comments you'd like to share with the viewers?
Well, thank you for having me. I mean, I'm going to start watching more of the channel, because I think that there's interesting conversations. By all means, ask me questions, but I'm not an expert per se, so I'm happy to share my experiences. And I think there's going to be more that we'll do together. I'm so excited to be, this is a new beginning. Thank you, Wakako, for having me.
Thank you so much, Jackie, and thank you everyone for watching our channel. And Jackie and our project will keep in touch and we will find a way to collaborate in the near future.
Yes,
Great.
For sure. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Jackie.
Bye.
Bye. We will see you next time.